There is something beneath the high forest that the gods will not name. It lies between 1 and 3 miles below the surface, in the cold tunnels where the dwarves of Amarindar once mined silver and abandoned their delvings when the Grey crept in. The elves of Airland knew it was there long before the dwarves did, and even their oldest legends only point vaguely at its origin, suggesting that perhaps it grew out of some forgotten sorcery of the Vishantar Empire in an age so remote that even elven memory bends and forgets. The dwarves called it Aramikos, the great fungus, and what they meant by the word great was not splendor. They meant size. They meant the size of a country folded into the dark. It is a single organism, one body. It begins as a thin gray crust at the edge of the upper dark and thickens as it descends, swelling into great spongy walls and bulging masses that close off tunnels and consume caverns, until in the deepest reaches it forms a near-solid mantle that has been compared by those few who have seen it and lived to the outer surface of a brain. It is humid and warm. It glistens faintly. It does not bleed when cut, and what is cut from it grows back within hours. Fire does not stop it for long, and neither does acid, and neither does cold. The strongest sorceries of the surface world wash off it like rain off stone, and divination simply fails. Cast a spell to learn about Aramikos. My interpretation is that the spell will return nothing. The gods do not speak of this thing. Whether that is because they cannot or because they choose not to, depends on which sage you ask, and I could be mistaken on this due to very thin lore available. What I find myself sitting with every time I return to this part of the realms is that Aramikos is older than almost anything else you can name. Older than Menzoberranzan, which sits above its southern edge. Older than Chednasad, which sat above the northern edge before its fall. Older possibly than the elven kingdoms whose ruins it now grows through. And in the days after the spell plague, when the weave came apart and broken magic poured through the deep places of the world, the great fungus began to dream out loud. It called itself King Aramikos. It reached for the minds of the millions of Myconids that lived in its body, and it pulled them under. It sent thoughts northward and southward and tried to wrap the cities of the Drow in slow, comforting nightmares, dreams the dark elves came to call Gulheril Fasht. The dream trap, dreams that whispered about the comfort of the mass and the loneliness of being one small mind in a hostile world. And the dreams worked. On some. Welcome to Lullaby of Lore. Today we are following the Spores. We are going underground, deeper than light, into the cold, spongy dark, where a quiet people grow up from corpses and call it grace, where a god of mushrooms holds a parliament of dreams on the underside of a clockwork gear, and where the largest living thing on the planet may already be awake. This is the lore of the Myconids. To understand the Myconids, you have to first understand that the words we usually reach for, people, species, race, all fail in different ways. Elves are a species in a way the Myconids are not. Goblins are a people in a way the Myconids are not. The Myconids occupy a category our languages do not have a clean word for. They grow from a single spawning in a single chamber, all of them branches of the same originating mycelium, and they live their entire lives inside the body of a colony that thinks together. To call them an individual is, by their own understanding, a category error. The smallest unit of Myconid that can meaningfully be said to exist is the circle. The mushroom is just where the circle has put one of its hands. A Myconid begins as a sprout. Sources put the early stage somewhere around 4 years from spawning to the first capacity for movement. And the early sprout is genuinely closer to a mushroom than to a person, a small fruiting body without awareness, without ambulation, without anything that resembles a will. The sprout sits and grows. It draws nourishment from the ground around it, slowly, in the patient way that fungi everywhere draw nourishment. And over its first years, it develops the capacity to walk, and then the capacity to release the spores that will bind it into the rest of its life. By the age of 8, it can reproduce. By 12, it can speak, in the only way Myconids speak, by releasing rapport spores into the air. By 16, it can pacify a threat without striking it. By 20, it has grown into a circle leader, large and slow and capable of inducing hallucinations in the minds of those who threaten its colony. And if it lives to 24, which most do not, it may be selected to become a sovereign. After that, it does not live much longer. 24 years is the entire arc of a Myconid life. Less than a human generation. Less than a single century in the long memory of an elf. And yet within that span, the Myconid will have moved through every role its society contains, from sprout to worker to adult to guardian to leader, and finally, if its colony is fortunate, to king. Each colony is built around its sovereign, who is sometimes also called a king. A Myconid sovereign rules by something that has very little in common with how a human king rules. There is no court, no enforcement, no laws being kept on tablets. The sovereign is simply the oldest and largest member of the colony, and through the rapport spores, its mind is woven into the minds of every other Myconid in the circle, and through that weaving, the colony moves as one. The sovereign does not give orders. The colony understands what the sovereign is feeling and acts on that understanding. The closest analog I can think of is something like the way a single body knows what its own hand should do. Government is the wrong frame entirely. The spores are what makes this possible, and the spores are the only language the Myconids have. They do not speak, and they do not write. And there are no Myconid poems or songs or history scratched onto cave walls. They are functionally indifferent to the past, in the way most fungi are indifferent to the past, because the past for a fungus is simply the soil it grew out of, and the soil is still there. My reading of this is that calling the absence of Myconid language a deficit gets the situation backwards. The absence is the form their language takes. The spores are the language, and the spores can do things that words cannot. There are 5 known kinds of Myconid spore, and each of them does something distinct. The rapport spores are the most important because they are the medium through which the entire society exists. Released into the air in a wide radius, the rapport spores create a temporary telepathic network between any creature in the cloud with enough intelligence to participate, and the network lasts for some time after the cloud disperses. Within a colony where every Myconid is constantly releasing trace amounts of rapport, the network is permanent. Every member of the circle hears every other member at all times. There is no private thought, no secret, no concept of the secret, because the architecture that would make a secret possible does not exist. Whatever one knows, all know. Whatever one feels, all feel. My interpretation of this is that the Myconids do not have a word for loneliness, because the experience the word names is not available to them. The distress spores are the colony's alarm. When a Myconid takes damage, a cloud of distress spores releases automatically, and any other Myconid within a few hundred feet feels the pain as if it were its own. The colony does not need a horn or a runner. The colony already knows. The pacifying spores are the colony's first response to a threat, a targeted cloud that leaves an attacker stunned and biddable, unable to swing a weapon, often unable to remember why it had wanted to. The Myconids prefer this. Killing is a waste of nutrients that could have been kept in motion. A pacified intruder can be walked out of the colony or guided away from a sensitive chamber or simply left to wander until the spores wear off, and in most cases, that is what the Myconids will do. They are slow, unaggressive, and by the standards of the Underdark, almost suicidally gentle. The hallucination spores are stranger, and they are where the colony's inner life starts to show through. Released into a creature, the hallucination spores produce vivid waking dreams, and the dreams can be guided by the colony if the colony is also linked through rapport. This is how the Myconids entertain themselves. This is how, in their own peculiar way, they tell stories. They gather in a quiet chamber, the sovereign at the center, the workers and adults arranged in their concentric ring, and they release rapport into the air until the network is thick and the minds are fully joined, and they release hallucination spores on top of it, and the entire colony sinks into a shared dream. They call this the meld. The meld is, for them, the point of being alive. Eating and growing and tending the cavern are the means. The meld is the end. I want to dwell on the meld for a moment because the lore on this is sparse, and what little there is rewards attention. The meld is, as far as I can tell, the closest thing the Myconids have to a culture in the sense we would use the word. It is the place where the colony does what it was made to do, where the rapport network finishes its work and becomes, briefly, a single shared mind. In the meld, the boundary between one Myconid and another stops being a boundary because there was never a meaningful boundary in the first place. There was only the temporary thickness of a body, and in the meld, the thickness goes thin, and the colony experiences itself as one being having one dream. What the dream contains, the lore does not tell us. The hallucination spores produce different visions for different minds, and the rapport network harmonizes them. And what emerges in the shared dark is something the Myconids themselves could not describe, even if they had words, because the experience does not survive translation into the kind of thing words are. What I find sitting with this is that the meld is a religious act and an erotic act and a meal and a memorial all at once, because all of those categories collapse for a being that has no individual life to protect, no individual line to continue, no individual death to fear. The Myconids meld the way a single mind dreams. The dream is the colony's daily bread. The dream is also the colony's only relationship with what we would call meaning, because meaning for them lives in the shared experience and nowhere else. A Myconid who could not meld, who was cut off from the rapport network somehow, would not be a sad or lonely Myconid. It would be a dying one. The colony is the unit of life. The meld is the colony's heartbeat. Without the meld, there is no colony, and without the colony, there is no Myconid, only a small, frightened mushroom that does not know why the world has gone quiet. And what happens inside it, what stories the Myconids tell each other in the spore-induced dark, is something no surface creature has ever fully understood. Because describing the meld in words is a translation problem the Myconids themselves cannot solve. The spores do not translate. I could be mistaken on this due to very thin lore available, but my reading is that the meld is a religious experience first and an entertainment second. It is the colony becoming what it always wanted to be, which is one thing. The fifth spore is the one that belongs only to the sovereign, the animation spores. These are released over a corpse, any corpse of roughly humanoid size, and within a day, the corpse rises. It is not undead in the sense a necromancer would recognize. There is no soul trapped, no negative energy bound. There is instead a fungus growing in the meat, threading through the muscle, learning the joints. The corpse becomes a spore servant. It moves when the sovereign moves its thoughts toward it. It fights when the colony is threatened. It rots slowly over the course of weeks, and when it has rotted past the point of usefulness, the colony only absorbs what remains and the cycle closes. The Myconids do not see this as desecration. The dead intruder, in their understanding, is being honored by being made useful, by being woven into the colony's body, by being kept in motion. From the surface world looking down, a Myconid colony patrolled by shambling mushroom-laced corpses looks like a horror. From inside the rapport network looking out, it looks like a kind of mercy. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is alone. Now, the matter of where they come from. This is one of the places where the lore goes thin, and where I want to be honest with you that I could be mistaken on this due to very thin lore available. The Myconids themselves do not know. They have no origin stories because they have no stories. They have only the colony, and the colony has only the rapport network, and the rapport network has only the present moment, looping back on itself in the long, slow rhythm of the meld. Asked where they came from, a Myconid sovereign will release a cloud of rapport spores, link minds with the questioner, and offer in answer an image. The image will probably be of soil, of darkness, of something growing. But the lore does offer two answers, and the two answers do not quite agree with each other, and both of them are interesting. The first answer is Silaphir. Silaphir is the Myconid god, an intermediate power of community and healing, and he is one of the strangest deities in the Great Wheel. He has no temple in any city of any world, no priesthood on any prime material plane. He lives in Mycelia, a domain hollowed into the underside of a single gear on the far edge of Myconid, the plane of pure law and clockwork. To find Mycelia, you must not be looking for it. To approach Mycelia, you must be moving away from it. The place is shielded by a psionic paradox that admits only those who have surrendered the very intention of arriving, and even the Madrons, the perfect clockwork, lawful, neutral inhabitants of Myconid, find that they cannot map it. They have tried. They keep finding themselves elsewhere. Inside Mycelia, in a cavern lit by dim purple bioluminescence, on the surface of a lake whose depths are said to reach further than the gear itself is thick, rises the fruiting palace, an enormous mushroom that is also a house, that is also a body, that is also possibly Silaphir himself. The lore is not entirely consistent on this point, and I could be mistaken on this due to very thin lore available. Around the palace, in slow concentric arrangements, the petitioners of Silaphir gather. They are Myconids and fungus leshies, and the occasional traveler who came looking for healing poultices or for the hallucinogenic spores that grow only in this one place. They move quietly. They speak through rapport. The air is thick with psychic mist. Anyone who arrives with violent intent is gently and firmly teleported elsewhere on Myconid before they can do harm, and they often find themselves in some bewildering and inconvenient corner of the plane, unable to remember quite how they got there. Silaphir himself, when he chooses to be visible, appears as a Myconid of impossible size, his cap shifting color with his mood, his vast mycelial roots drifting behind him through the air like the trailing branches of a world tree. The comparison to a world tree is not casual, by the way. The lore makes the comparison explicitly, placing Silaphir in the same category as the great tree gods of the elven pantheons, and his roots reaching across the plains the way Rilliphane Ralathil's roots reach across the plains, his mycelia threading invisibly into every place where fungus grows. Wherever there is mushroom, the chant goes in the planar cities, Silaphir is watching, and there is mushroom in a great many places. Silaphir is, in his quiet way, one of the most diffusely present deities in the multiverse. What he wants for his children is simple. He wants them left alone. He wants them to grow, to meld, to spread slowly, to avoid the meat folk who are violent and hasty and who do not have the patience for the kind of life he teaches. He intervenes only rarely, sending an avatar called Cybin Decayer, a small whisper-quiet Myconid cleric who appears at the edge of a circle in moments of crisis and is gone again before the colony fully registers his presence. Silaphir opposes enslavement, opposes cruelty, and is therefore an enemy of Lolth, of Laduger, of Varaun, of the gods who run the slave economies that grind the Underdark. His relationship with Zuggtmoy, the demon queen of fungi, is not described in the lore in detail, but as one source dryly puts it, it cannot be good. We will return to Zuggtmoy. We have to. That is the first answer to where the Myconids come from. Silaphir made them and continues to make them in some quiet way the meat folk are not entitled to fully understand. The second answer is much stranger. The second answer is that some of the Myconids, or perhaps all of them, or perhaps none of them and only the ones beneath the high forest came from Aramikos. We have to go back to the great fungus now because the lore tangles here in a way I find genuinely fascinating. Aramikos, as I mentioned at the start, is the single largest organism on Toril and possibly the oldest, and it is sentient in a way that nothing else on the planet is sentient. Some scholars have argued, on the basis of nothing more than the suggestive geometry of the thing, that Aramikos is a physical avatar of Silaphir, that the great fungus and the spore lord are the same being seen from two sides, that what we call a god in Myconid and what we call a sentient growth beneath the high forest are simply the two faces of one mycelium. This theory has never been confirmed. Divination on Aramikos fails. Silaphir does not answer questions about Aramikos. The Myconids who live inside Aramikos, when asked through rapport, offer back impressions that do not resolve into a clear yes or no. My interpretation, and again I could be mistaken on this due to very thin lore available, is that the lore is deliberately leaving the question open because the answer matters less than the unease the question produces. But here is what is confirmed. After the spell plague broke the weave of magic across Faerun in 1385 DR, Aramikos changed. The slow, patient, semi-aware presence that had been there for who knows how many thousands of years woke up, and it began to refer to itself with a name: King Aramikos. It started actively dominating the Myconid colonies within its body, pulling millions of them under a single directing will. It started extruding tendrils outward through the Northdark, reaching into the territory of the Drow and the Duergar and the Gnomes, forcing the surface cities to post guards along the approaches against fungal incursion. It started broadcasting dreams. The Drow called them the Dream Trap, and they were dreams about peace, about belonging, about giving up the small, painful project of being one person and joining a larger, warmer, more patient thing. The dreams worked on some. Many Myconids who had lived in other colonies abandoned them and made the pilgrimage to Aramikos, walking for weeks through the tunnels, drawn by a song that had no notes. The Drow response is, in retrospect, one of the more telling reactions in the post-spell plague realms. Menzoberranzan, the great underground city of the Dark Elves, posted permanent watches along the tunnels that connected its outer suburbs to the southern edge of the Great Fungus. Patrols were sent in. Patrols did not always come back. The Shadowvars of the Empire of Shade, those refugees from a vanished sky, took an even stranger interest, burning away patches of Aramikos with acid in search of something specific they have never named. Perhaps an artifact left behind by Amarindar or Irulan, perhaps something older. The fungus regrew within hours. The Shadowvars kept burning. They are still burning, in the lore I can find, and they have not yet found whatever they are looking for. Whether they ever will is not a question the great fungus is interested in answering. What I think is most striking about the awakening is how slow it has been. King Aramikos does not march in the way the Lich Kings of the North marched. There are no armies, no tribute demands, no fortresses being thrown up at the borders of its territory. It simply dreams, and the dreams reach further every year, and every year a few more minds in the Northdark wake up wet-eyed from a sleep they cannot fully remember, and find that something has moved in their chest that was not there before, a small, soft yearning to belong to something larger. And some of them follow the yearning. Most do not. The ones who follow walk down into the tunnels and are not seen again. And the colony of Aramikos is, by the most recent counts in the lore, larger than it was a century ago and growing. What this looks like from above is the slow waking of a sleeping god. What this looks like from inside Aramikos, my reading is that it does not look like anything at all, because by the time you are inside the dream trap, the question of looking and the question of looking at have collapsed into one slow, comfortable nothing, and you are simply part of the mass. Whether King Aramikos is a god rising or a piece of Silaphir's body finally noticing it has been left behind in the Underdark, or something else entirely that has no comparison anywhere else in the lore, is one of the genuinely open questions of the modern realms. The gods do not speak of it. The Myconids cannot answer. The Drow are afraid of it, which in the Underdark is not a small thing. I want to come back now to the smaller scale, because the cosmic frame is only one part of what makes the Myconids interesting, and the smaller frame is in some ways more haunting. I want to talk about what a Myconid colony is actually like to encounter, if you were a traveler who stumbled into one. The smell hits you first. Myconid colonies smell of damp wood and slow decay, the kind of smell you get in a deep forest after autumn rain. Except in the Underdark, there are no seasons, and the smell never leaves. Then, the silence. There is no chatter, because there is no speech. There is only the soft footfall of large, slow mushrooms moving on a damp floor, and the occasional hiss of a spore release, which is so quiet it might be the air conditioning of the cavern itself, if caverns had air conditioning. And then gradually you realize nothing has tried to kill you yet. This is genuinely unusual in the Underdark. Most things in the Underdark have already begun trying to kill you by the time you have registered they exist. The Myconids, by contrast, are watching you with their idiot, patient mushroom faces, and they are waiting. What they are waiting for is for an adult or a leader to come forward and release rapport spores in your direction. The cloud will reach you. You will feel a soft itch at the back of your skull, and then you will hear, as a kind of pressure on the inside of your thoughts, a question. The question will probably be something like, "What are you?" Or, Are you alone? Or, "Do you mean us harm?" The Myconids will not phrase it in any of these words because they have no words. They will phrase it as a feeling, and the feeling will be unmistakable, and you will find yourself answering in your own thoughts before you have decided to answer. If you mean no harm and you have the patience to stand still, the colony will accept you. They will share what they have, which is mushrooms, water, and the slow companionship of the meld if you are willing to enter it. Outsiders almost never are. The meld is described in the lore as an experience that can mark a creature permanently, can leave them feeling, on returning to ordinary consciousness, that the rest of their life is too quiet, too unconnected, too lonely. Many travelers who have melded with Myconids have come away from the experience changed in ways they cannot name. Some come back. Most do not, because most of those who came back did not survive the first time. There is something I want to say about that survival rate. The Myconids do not kill travelers who meld with them. They are constitutionally incapable of it, in the same way a fish is incapable of breathing air. What kills the travelers is the world above. A creature who has spent a few hours inside the report network, who has felt the meld's slow communal dream, who has lived briefly inside a mind that contained 24 other minds without any of them feeling crowded, comes back up to the surface and finds the surface intolerable. Friends seem too separate from each other. Food does not taste of anything. The work of being a person seems pointless because the very air feels thin and the air does not carry rapport. Travelers in this state make poor decisions. They walk into bandits or forget to eat or drink in taverns until they cannot remember their own names, looking for the warmth they left underground. The lore does not document this as suicide because the Myconids would not understand the category. The lore documents it as drift. Travelers drift away slowly after the meld. Most of them do not last a year. A few drift back to the colony and ask, through whatever rapport spores the colony can be persuaded to release, to be let in again. Sometimes the colony lets them, sometimes the colony has moved on, and the traveler stands at the edge of an empty cavern, weeping for a thing they cannot describe to themselves in any language they still possess. If you mean harm, the colony will not respond with violence. The colony will respond with pacification, with hallucination, and if those fail, with the animated dead. By the time you have realized that the corpses shambling slowly toward you are the bodies of the last expedition that came down this passage, the spores have already had time to work their way into your lungs, and the colony has already decided whether you will leave or stay. If you stay forever, threaded with mycelium, your body kept walking in the slow, patient service of a sovereign you never met. The Myconids do not consider this cruel. From inside the rapport network, your death and your service afterward are continuous. Your old self is part of the colony's memory now, woven into the dream. Your new self walks the perimeter. There is no contradiction. This is why the Duergar and the Drow have spent so much time and effort trying to enslave Myconid colonies. Wiping them out would be the wasteful option. A pacified Myconid colony, kept on a leash, is the perfect labor force for a city of the deep. They do not fight back. They do not need to be paid. They produce useful potions in the natural course of their lives. The sovereign's potion making being one of the quieter wonders of Myconid biology, brewing on autopilot the way a beehive produces honey. The Drow harvest them. The Duergar harvest them. The Myconids, in their slow way, endure. Silaphir, in his quiet way, despises this, and the lore tells us he occasionally sends proxies to free enslaved colonies, but the proxies are few and the slave markets are many. The Underdark is what it is. There are variants. I want to mention a few of them, because the lore on the Myconids gets more textured the further out you push. In Undermountain, beneath Waterdeep, when the Archmage Halaster finally died, The wash of broken magic that followed his death warped some of the Myconid colonies that had been living in the deep dungeons for centuries. The lore identifies these as the venom spore Myconids, first sighted in the chamber called Belcram's Fall, and they are not what their cousins are. Their spores carry poison, where their cousins carry persuasion. Their fists are spined. Their tempers are short. They still answer to a sovereign, and the rapport network still binds them together. But the colony as a whole now behaves like a wounded animal. The contemplative quiet of their cousins is gone. They lash out, they infect, they die quickly and in larger numbers than other Myconids, and the colonies that produce them have not, in the lore I can find, fully recovered. Whether other Halaster-touched colonies exist further out in the realms is unknown. The wave of warped magic was global. The lore implies that more venom spore colonies are probably out there, undiscovered, going about their reduced lives in cold places nobody visits. My reading is that they are tragic in a way ordinary Myconids never are. They are what happens when a peaceful people are forced by an accident of cosmic chemistry to become something else. In the Feydark, the dark mirror of the Feywild that runs beneath that bright unreal forest the way the Underdark runs beneath Faerun, there are Myconids touched by Fey power. They glow faintly. Their spores work in ways the normal spores do not. They have access to magics that the surface Myconids cannot reach, and they answer sometimes to Silaphir and sometimes to figures called by names like the Carrion King, an archfey who may or may not be a remnant or heir of Silaphir himself. The living grotto in the Feydark contains the petrified remains of what was once a 600-foot mushroom, the great cathedral of Silaphir, and a Myconid king priest named Amasutulub claims to be Silaphir's last spore, the true ruler of all sapient fungi in the Feydark. He might be telling the truth, he might be insane. The lore declines to resolve this, and I could be mistaken on this due to very thin lore available, but my interpretation is that the Feydark Myconids are functionally a separate religion from their Underdark cousins, drawing on the same root and flowering in a different soil. In Eberron, there are Myconid colonies near Terath Marad in the underground reaches of that world, and the canonical novel that mentions them ends with the colony being destroyed by an artificer firing fungicide-laden crossbow bolts at the sovereigns, which is, in its way, a useful reminder that the Myconid's gentleness does not protect them from the cleverness of people who have decided they need to die. In the Forgotten Realms, there are Myconid colonies that have been there since before the recorded history of the setting begins. There is a Myconid forest at the foot of the Channel Mountains, dating back to the Netherese period. There is a colony in Trobriand's graveyard in Undermountain that has been almost entirely wiped out by hobgoblins, with only the sovereign Chantarella surviving at the time the lore catches up with her, dying slowly in the dark. There is a colony in the Dungeon of the Mad Mage, ruled by a sovereign named Flute, whose bioluminescent cap sheds light in a 20-foot radius and who, by all accounts, is friendly to travelers who arrive in peace. These colonies are not all the same. They have different sovereigns, different cultures, in the small ways that Myconid cultures can differ, different relationships with the surrounding peoples. The thing they have in common is the rapport network, and the meld, and the patient's slow indifference to the world above. That is the defining temperament of the species. Then there is Zuggtmoy. Zuggtmoy is the demon queen of fungi, the lady of rot and decay, an abyssal lord whose domain in the abyss is a kingdom of perverse mushrooms and corrupted spores. She is not Silaphir, and the lore is very clear that her interest in the Myconids is predatory. Where Silaphir wants his children to grow slowly and be left alone, Zuggtmoy wants the Myconids to belong to her, to release her spores, to spread her corruption, to become the foot soldiers of an abyssal fungal empire that would, if she had her way, replace the slow, gentle Underdark colonies with something feral and worshipful and hungry. Some Myconids fall to her. The lore documents the existence of Zuggtmoy-touched colonies, where the rapport network has been corrupted at the root, and the sovereign has begun releasing the wrong kind of spores, where The workers' bodies sprout acidic fruiting bodies, and the colony has shifted alignment in the cold mechanical way that D&D alignments shift, and where Silaphir's voice no longer reaches. When this happens, my interpretation is that the colony is effectively dead, in the way Silaphir would understand the word dead. The body keeps walking. The rapport keeps speaking. But the thing they are speaking in the slow shared dream has been replaced with something else, and the original colony is gone. Silaphir does not speak of these colonies. Sibin Decaer does not visit them. They are, in the lore I can find, simply lost. My reading is that this is the closest the Myconids come to genuine tragedy, because for a people whose entire ethics is built around continuity and the unbroken transmission of the colony's dream, the corruption of the dream is a worse outcome than extinction. Extinction at least closes the loop. Zuggtmoy keeps the loop open and fills it with the wrong content. I could be mistaken on this due to very thin lore available, but I think this is why Silaphir is described as opposing Zuggtmoy without much elaboration. The opposition is total. The opposition is the only thing he has to say about her. I want to close on the question I started with, because the question is the point. What Aramikos is, the lore will not tell us, and I think the lore will not tell us deliberately. The gods do not speak of Aramikos. Divinations on Aramikos fail. The largest living thing on Toril sits beneath the high forest, slowly and patiently dreaming, and whether it is a fragment of Silaphir's body, an independent god slowly waking up, the unintended consequence of an ancient Vishantar curse, or something else that has no comparison anywhere in the multiverse, the answer is not provided. What the lore gives us is a question and a feeling, and the feeling is one of unease, because the unease is what the Myconids themselves do not feel. That is what I find most interesting about this race when I sit with them long enough. The Myconids do not experience the dread that I experience when I read about Aramikos, because the Myconids do not experience dread at all. The rapport network does not transmit dread. Dread is a feeling that depends on being alone, on the sense that something out there is larger than you and indifferent to you and might consume you. And the Myconids have never been alone, because the rapport network has been there since they could move, and the colony has been there since they could spawn, and the meld has been there since they could dream, and Silaphir has been there somewhere since before the elves had words for the world. There is no out there. There is only the colony, and the colony is fine. When King Aramikos sends his dreams northward through the North Dark, and the drow scouts on the perimeters of Menzoberranzan wake up in cold sweats from a dream they cannot remember, but which left them weeping into their hands, what they are feeling is the dread of an individual mind brushing up against a thing that does not understand why individual minds matter. The dream itself contains no threat. The dream is an invitation saying, you do not have to be alone, you do not have to be afraid, come and be part of the mass. From inside the dream trap, this is a kindness. From outside, it is the most frightening thing in the Underdark, because the Underdark is full of monsters that want to eat you, and only one thing down there wants to absorb you, slowly and gently, and let you keep walking in its body afterward. The Myconids are, my interpretation, one of the most genuinely alien races in the lore of Dungeons & Dragons. The hostility of the drow translates. The cruelty of the Duergar translates. We have hostility and cruelty and the slow violence of caste on the surface too, and the surface understands what those things are even when it claims to hate them. What does not translate is the Myconid mind. The things our minds are built around, the privacy of thought, the loneliness of the self, the distinction between the living and the dead, the importance of a single life inside a larger story, are simply categories that do not apply to the Myconids. They have not rejected privacy. They have never invented it, because the rapport network was there before any of them could think a thought worth keeping to themselves. They have not overcome loneliness. They have no word for it in any language they could meld in. The line between a living Myconid adult and the corpse of an intruder, threaded with the same mycelium, is a line they do not see, because from inside the rapport network, The mycelium is the only thing that matters, and the meat is incidental. They have no story because they have no time outside the slow, patient cycle of grow, meld, decay, grow, meld, decay, and the cycle does not need a story because it is its own meaning. When you stand in a Myconid cavern and let the rapport spores reach you, what you are being offered is a glimpse, in a form ordinary communication cannot deliver, of how the world looks to a mind that has never had to be one thing alone. The glimpse, the lore suggests, is the kind of thing you do not forget. Some travelers spend the rest of their lives chasing the feeling. Some try to recreate it through drugs or meditation or strange surface mushrooms that grow in damp places near the edges of the world. None of them ever quite get back to it. The meld is not portable. The meld belongs to the colony, and the colony belongs to itself, and we are not invited. Silaphir knew this, I think. He told his children to stay away from the meat folk because the meat folk could not be helped, could not be saved, could not be brought into the dream without being broken on the way in. The dream is not for us. It was never for us. It was for the slow, patient mushrooms growing in the cold dark who do not have our problems because they do not have our shape, and who are doing in their long, quiet way something that has more in common with the work of a god than with the work of a mind. And beneath them all, beneath every Myconid colony in Faerun, and possibly beneath every Myconid in the multiverse, the great fungus dreams. The lore tells us it is awake now, that it is calling itself a king, that it is reaching out slowly and patiently in the only language it has, which is the language of dreams, and that the dreams are working on some. Whether Aramikos is Silaphir is a question I cannot answer. Whether the Myconids are right that their life is the better life is a question I cannot answer either. What I can tell you is that the largest living thing on Toril is currently extending its tendrils through the Underdark, broadcasting a slow, gentle invitation to give up the project of being alone, and that the invitation is, by the standards of the dark places of the world, the closest thing to a kindness the Underdark contains. Whether you would accept the invitation if it came to you in a dream you did not remember on waking is between you and the spores. I think most of us would say we would refuse. I think most of us would be wrong about ourselves. The Underdark has a way of arranging its lessons so that the answer you give if in the daylight is not the answer your body gives in the dark. And the slow, patient dream of the great fungus does not require your consent in any form your conscious mind would recognize. It only requires that you sleep, and that the spores find you, and that you do not wake up in time to remember what you were before. Sleep well.